So you're writing a book and you're stuck. It just doesn't feel fun anymore somehow. Maybe it's just one scene. Maybe it's the entire outline. Maybe it's a certain character. You're just not excited to write this part of the book. Some of you might have heard about the concept of universal tropes. T. Taylor wrote a book called Seven Figure Fiction that quickly became pretty well known in writing circles through its idea of butter. Butter being the universal fantasies that you add to a book to make it appeal to the masses. And universal fantasies can still fit into a fairly niche genre, but they're about kind of identifying the genre that you write and what those particular readers find delicious, like butter. But you might ask, what about your favorite hot sauce? What about furikake? What about curry flavored ketchup? What about the seasoning that you just happen to really, really like, but it is not necessarily a universal seasoning? It is not butter, something that everyone who isn't avoiding butter for health, allergy, or ethics reasons would find delicious. That's what I'm talking about here. Your own special sauce that you just happen to really like the flavor of, a list of delights just for you. I think I first heard about this and how it can help you get out of a rut. I believe it was my friend Diana Peterfreund who first told me about this concept of having a list of things that she just really digs whenever she's writing or reading. Those things that just always call out to her, and they might be incredibly specific. And I thought that was such a brilliant idea. I've spent a lot of time trying to think how to appeal to other people. And don't get me wrong, you do need to think of some things that will appeal to a larger audience. But sometimes it's worth thinking about the things that just really, really appeal to you. And you might not be thinking about how many other people are really into this thing, but chances are there are some. Another thing I like about this list is that it's kind of about leaning into the particular kind of creative that you are. If you spend any amount of time studying what's popular, studying the tropes in your genre, studying what's hot on social media or anything like that, you can start to be concerned over the things that are uniquely you. But ideally you want to find a way to mingle them, and you want to find a way to keep yourself sustained, even if you're writing to market and are not entirely writing for you. You still want to bear in mind what are those little tidbits of you-ishness that you can sprinkle in there. And also, I think I came to the realization at some point that it's okay to duplicate ideas if they're an idea that can be recycled more than once. Let's say you really love books set in a circus. Well, there's more than one way to tell that story. No one's going to mind if you write 2 different books set in a circus over the course of your career. Especially if you've done a lot of research on circuses or you've been in a circus. You really know the circus life, so you might as well lean into that and write more than one character who's been in the circus. There's a lot of things like that. Things that I like and I've written more than once because I like them. And if I'm vibing with it, nobody's going to mind because some of my readers are probably also vibing with the same thing that I am. Therefore, they'll probably be happy to see me do it twice. Or even 3 times. But yes, the biggest benefit of this little trick is to pull me out of a rut and remind myself, what do I really like in a story? Now, what are you looking for? I have a general list I made here of what you're going to write down. It can be places you really like, places and settings. It can be your character's job or role. It can be types of characters. It can be character quirks. It can be tropes, scenarios, themes, events, or things. So I pulled out the list that I made a while ago, and here's what I would suggest you do. Just start writing stream of consciousness, things that you really dig. Wrong notebook. See, I wrote this in 2020 or something like that. Of things that I like. Men cooking. I like men cooking, like men wearing an apron. Like men who don't seem like they would cook, who suddenly turn out to be really good cooks, or men who aren't good cooks and have never cooked before, suddenly kind of figuring it out. Like when Alfred learns to make scrambled eggs and the potion dealers. He's never going to cook much of anything, but good for him. I like pets. I like it when characters have a pet. Sometimes I feel like characters in books don't get to have pets as often as real people have pets. How many people you know have pets versus people who don't have pets? Chances are it's like more than half the people you know have pets. But in books, pets get forgotten, and it's a really good way to just kind of like throw in a little fun aspect of a character, like what did they name the pet, what relationship do they have with the pet, what kind of pet is it. That's fun to me, just coming up with the pet. Male BFFs slash bromance. There's a trope I never get tired of. A good bromance. Old houses. I love describing old houses, and I have a bunch of books on like architecture and like interior design for like old houses, you know, old French farmhouse and things like that I can look at to remind me like different ways to describe old houses. And I've also watched a lot of HGTV, especially the old house ones. So I love throwing that in a book. Girls dressing as boys, boys dressing as girls, and just general gender mix-up, androgyny stuff. That's one I probably haven't written a whole lot, but I did write it down. So, you know, maybe I'm due for a like gender swap book at some point. Challenging the norms of society. That's a theme that I love and one that I identify with as well. Fashion. Gloves, fans, neckties, corsets, and stockings is what I noted specifically, but let's face it, I like to describe fashion in all sorts of ways. I like to describe types of fabrics, patterns, trimmings, hats, like what fashion says about you culturally, where you get your fashion information. I've given characters like made-up fashion magazines, fashion shops. I love describing fashion, and I also happen to know a lot about fashion history, so it's an aspect that I can easily write without having to do a lot of research. It's always nice when you can work your areas of interest into a book. Lean into that. Claws, tails, horns, and wings. There's a favorite romance fantasy device that also probably happens to be butter to a lot of readers, but it's a good reminder for me. If you're a little bored with a character, give him some claws. Characters with a vice. That's interesting that I wrote that down. I'm like, is that a thing? I guess it kind of is. I guess the thing about a character having a vice is that it's a fun way to reveal, like, a little bit about them psychologically. A little vulnerability, for example, in a tough guy that he has a vice, or a little bit of something roguish without it being, like, criminal. Persnickety characters and neat freaks. That's a funny one for me because I'm not neat at all, but maybe I have a fantasy of living with someone who is neat. And I do enjoy writing stories where you have a clash between a really slovenly character and a really neat character. My character Det, who I've been writing about for a very long time, he appears briefly in The Potion Dealers, but when I was watching Attack on Titan, I saw a little bit of Det and Levi because they're both kind of that short, very badass, and they like to have a very, very clean house or building, headquarters, wherever they happen to be. They like it to be clean. Spoiled girls. Oh yeah, I love me a spoiled girl. Spoiled girl with a heart of gold, mind you. I don't want her to actually be a horrible bitch or anything, but I love a girl who's just got some curls to toss. Christmas. Being a fantasy writer, a lot of my books take place in other worlds where they don't have Christmas, but I kind of like have a Christmas equivalent in my main fantasy world because I love Christmas. I love just all the like over the top trappings of Christmas, and that could probably apply to other holidays as well, but like when I was a kid, the magic of like going back and reading the Christmas chapters of the Little House books and the Betsy Tacy books. I think it's Betsy in spite of herself that has the German Christmas, which is just the best. Betsy Tacy has the best Christmases. But yeah, I love Christmas. Complicated grappling with religion and spirituality. I do like characters that are, it's funny, I'm going to talk about this probably when I talk about the Una and Vari book, because Una and Vari are both very dedicated to their death god's religion. I feel like religion is somewhat avoided in novels, but in real life, It's something people have to grapple with. Do you believe in anything? What do you believe? Does it differ from how you were raised? I like that in fantasy we have a little bit of a distance from the complications and tensions of our real world religions, and we can talk about those things without it being quite the same as the baggage we might have with different religions here. So I like writing characters, especially in fantasy, that are dealing with their religion or their spirituality. Gardens. Yes, I do love to write about gardens. I can't garden worth a damn, but I love describing beautiful gardens or characters gardening. So those are the ones that I wrote down at the time. I could probably add a few more now. Like, I would love to write a book that takes place on a boat or has like a strong, like, nautical seaside kind of air about it. I love the Ellen Montgomery books, how they always have that like maritime Prince Edward Island atmosphere. So I would love to write a book that has that like New England sea village, or even a little more southern. Just would love to do an atmosphere like that. I love writing about characters that are writers, and I know people make fun of that a little bit, writers writing about writers, but this is all about what you enjoy. You don't have to feel guilty about it. And I particularly like characters that write ridiculous, tropey, like romance novels. This comes up in both my fairy tale, The Beggar Princess, as well as in the Unavari book, and I just find it really fun to write about characters writing romance novels, even though I myself am more of a fantasy writer, but I just think it's very fun to describe, to like lovingly sort of make fun of romance novels via a character who loves them. And I just think there's like a lot of humor in the romance novel writing character, and I find it fun. Festivals. I would love to write a festival that's kind of like the like festival that always appears in a shoujo manga. They always go to the like school festival where there's like fireworks and booths selling takoyaki. I'm not going to write a story set in Japan, so I'm not going to actually write a Japanese school festival, but I do think it would be fun to write a fun festival in a book. Kind of along with my love of Christmas, I think it would be fun to write a good festival. Cooking manga. I would love to write a book that has aspects of a cooking manga or a cooking anime. Like, I feel like the Little House books are kind of like cooking manga because they'll have these descriptions in detail about how foods are made. And I would love to write a book that has characters like, maybe they're on like a severe budget, because I think that's also like, you know, part of the fun of some books like that, where you have to make do with not a lot and you're cooking something with like your garden produce, and it goes into like detail about the cooking and like the communal aspect of cooking and sharing food. I would love to work that into a book at some point. Decadent palaces with lots of rules. I like a lot of obnoxious court etiquette. I've always found Versailles, 18th century Versailles, very fascinating, and just like reading about all the pomp and like weird things about courts, royal courts. So when I write that part of fantasy book, I like to lean into that sometimes. So yeah, you know what? I could probably keep going, but there's some of mine. I suggest you sit down, write some of yours, just keep this list. How do you make the list? If you're having trouble thinking of some things, I would suggest like just looking over like your favorite books. What are some little particular things you like about those books, or your own past works, or, you know, you could maybe even go to a library, browse some nonfiction, and just remember like, oh yeah, I'm really interested in, you know, this thing. I'm really interested in this time period. I'm really interested in like the 1940s. I'm really interested in myths and legends. Like whatever kind of grabs you that you could remind yourself to work into a book. Gives you an excuse to learn more about that thing and like find a way to work it into a story. And then as far as how do you apply it to a book, what I sometimes do is if I'm stuck in a book, I'm just like, I don't want to write it anymore. I'm bored. Maybe I plotted it all out in a way that would appeal to the audience and I forgot to entertain myself. So that's where I'll kind of like look at the list and see if anything pops out at me as like, I could add that in. I could change up the setting a little. I could change this character so that they have this kind of job that I really love writing. I could add in Christmas, whatever it is. Just working in themes or settings and like leaning into the specificity of things that you really love to write, because when you write a good book, oftentimes what appeals to people is both the general and the very specific. If you're overly specific, you can risk alienating people who don't find anything kind of common ground to grab onto. But if you're all the general, then you haven't given anybody anything special to delight in. And you might have even forgotten to delight yourself. I'm planning a video soon about like just general tips for avoiding getting stuck in books, and I'm like still working on my script for that one because that's going to have a lot to talk about. But I didn't want to bog that video down with this particular tip. I wanted to elaborate on this in its own video because this is one that I use sometimes when I get stuck. So I would love to know your list in the comments. I even think it would be fun to see how many things you all might overlap on that you think are your own specific thing, but it turns out a lot of people. And you know what? We could grab some ideas from each other's lists. I think that would be a lot of fun. Disheveled editing Lydia has her hair down today. Glamour. But I hope it's obvious. But when I say share ideas and get ideas from each other, obviously I don't mean your super special, unique idea that you don't want anybody to steal. I mean more like broad ideas like men cooking and maritime settings. You can take any of my ideas because they're not overly unique. So yeah, I hope that's obvious, but I know some people are extremely sensitive about their ideas being stolen, so I just wanted to make that clear. So let me know, what is your special seasoning that excites you to write? If you're new here, my name is Lydia Foxglove. I'm a fantasy author. I have been making my living as a writer since 2009. Here on this channel, I talk about the creative life in general and the writing life in particular. If that sounds good to you, I'd love to have you stick around. And if you'd like more from me, I have Patreon and Substack, free content on both, as well as memberships, including on YouTube, where you get 2 bonus videos a month voted on by you guys, and access to my Discord, where we have a blast talking in more depth about stuff, all about writing and creative life. If you want to read any of my books, I always recommend my Hidden Lands books first because they are my babies, the ones I put the most into. But my free book of the month is not from the Hidden Lands. It is a funny, lighthearted, rather spicy paranormal romance called Fae Sworn. So if you want something fun to read for the summer, check that one out. There's a link in the description. I post on Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern and oftentimes also on Wednesday at 8 or 9 p.m. Eastern if you want to pop in for my live chat. And as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for supporting the channel. And I will see you next time. Bye!